Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Kathy. Let's accompany each other on our way to achieve our goals and go through what will be a difficult time together. In my second episode, I invited David Bell, who has been a tech executive for more than 4 decades in Silicon Valley and is now the CEO and founder of UVCense and the Actev Robotcis. And special thanks to Ray for helping me get in touch with Dave. Hi, Dave.
Good morning, Kathy. How are you?
Great. How's your day?
Very good. It's good to talk to you on the other side of the world.
Yeah, me too. I feel the same. Although it's super early, but we can even see the sunrise back then.
Yeah, it's perfect. I'll get to see a beautiful sunrise during our conversation.
Yeah. Then would you like to introduce a bit more about yourself to the audience?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the state of Michigan in the United States. I went to university at MIT in Boston, and then I traveled across the country to California. My first job was with Hewlett-Packard, initially as an intern when I was at MIT for a couple summers. And then in 1978, I joined Hewlett-Packard full-time and spent a little bit more than 40 years in Silicon Valley. And then about 2 years ago, moved back across the country to the state of North Carolina, and that's where I'm working now with my startup companies.
When did you found your first company?
My first company I founded, I think it was in, I have to think back, around 1986. I founded my first company. I started at Hewlett-Packard. As I mentioned, I was there several years, and then I went to a startup company. I wasn't a founder there, but I joined as one of the first employees. And when that company closed down, and I learned a lot through that company as well, then I started my own company. Certainly, starting your own company, you learn a lot of things. Some things you learn by failing, and some things you learn that turn into be successes.
Yeah, that is to my next question. Have you learned any keys to success when it comes to creating a high-tech startup company?
Yeah, I've learned quite a bit. And first I'll say that I think one of the great things about Silicon Valley and the high-tech community in general, I think, is that failure is not regarded as a permanent problem. I think in a lot of cultures and businesses, if you fail, people say, well, you're never going to be a success. Fortunately, it isn't regarded that way, especially in Silicon Valley. So people oftentimes regard CEOs that have maybe even been with 1 or 2 startups that failed, but learned a lot in the process, are even more valuable. But myself, I think some of the keys to being successful in a startup company, number one is just perseverance. Having to work hard, being disciplined. I think perseverance is one of the key things to a successful startup. Not that perseverance guarantees success, but if you don't have perseverance, your likelihood of success is very low. Another thing that I think is important as well is being agile. So by that I mean that if you've got a goal in sight, you're going to run as hard as you can towards that goal, but things that are unforeseen come up. Maybe the market changes, a new technology comes along, a new competitor comes along. So having to always keep your eyes open and looking around, even though you're aiming at your goal, you may need to change your direction somewhat. And I think that's really important. I learned a really valuable lesson for the first startup company I joined when I left Hewlett-Packard. That would have been back in 1982. The company was very successful, and it was doing an office automation system, and it was based on a centralized mini computer. But several years into that company, the IBM PC came out. And the first IBM PC changed everything. Now, instead of using centralized computers, you had a computer on your desk. It was a distributed architecture. However, this company that I worked for, they had their strategy and they were unwilling to change. They could have remained very successful if they looked at that new change that came along with the IBM PC and adjusted their strategy, but they didn't adjust their strategy, and as a result, they failed. So that was an important lesson. You have to be agile, and when something new comes along that you didn't anticipate, you may need to adjust your strategy.
Okay, that's another thing to think about, because once the people has a goal, they has to be very focused on that goal, and
Yep.
if that person also so ensure that the way to achieve their goal also works, then it's hard to make them to change their direction to the newest or to the most up to date way
Yep.
to do that.
But sometimes you must. When unforeseen changes, like I say, technology, new competition, the market changes. Just look what happened during the last year and a half with COVID. That disrupted many, many things. So
Yeah.
companies had to make adjustments to something they didn't anticipate. I think another key to being successful, and it certainly was key to my success at Linear Technology, where I became president there, was anticipating what the market is going to need. Many marketing experts will tell you, listen to what the customers are saying, listen to what the customers ask for, and give the customers what they want.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a reasonable thing to do, but I think the most successful companies don't always listen to their customers. Henry Ford, the founder of Ford Motor Company, he once said, if I asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. So they didn't know to ask for a car. They didn't know what a car was. So Henry Ford, he listened to his customers, but he didn't do exactly what his customers wanted. Nor did Steve Jobs. Again, he said, customers don't know what they want until I show them. So you need to listen to the customers, take that input, but don't just do what the customers are asking for, because customers generally are not very visionary. There's another expression in the US, at least, that we commonly talk about, and that is something that a famous hockey player has said. It's a guy named Wayne Gretzky. In the US, he's known as the most famous hockey player. And he always said, skate to where the puck is going to be. In hockey, you've got the puck that's flying around on the ice. And he said, don't skate to where the puck is now. You need to skate to where the puck is going to be. So it's said another way, you need to anticipate what the market is going to need maybe several years from now. Even though the market doesn't know what they need, you need to aim for what you think the market is going to need when your product comes to market.
That's a lot of hard points, There's also two sides. Like some people, they does it very good. Some people, no, some companies, they don't do it good. For example, like some companies, they so sure the new products are going to be like a hit. But actually,
Yeah.
it turns out the market doesn't respond to it very well. And some companies, they don't think or they kind of doubt whether their new products will be a hit or not. But it turns out super good. But I understand that the customers, they generally, some of them, like the majority of clients, they don't actually respond to the question, what do you need?
Right.
Yeah, they don't like this kind of question. They would be more happy to see what kind of options do they have.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to help them to solve the problem. Yeah, that's the key, I think.
Yeah, and what I did in my career at Linear Technology is I spent much of my time, probably 60% of my time, traveling and meeting with customers. And I didn't just ask customers, what do you want us to make? I would ask them, tell me about your product. We'd go to the whiteboard and say, draw me a block diagram of your product. And I'd say, well, how are you doing this? Or why are you doing it that way? What are you going to do for the next generation product? How are you going to solve that problem? So you build a rapport, a relationship with the customer, and you just talk about these things. And, what if we came out with a product that did this? Would that be interesting? They might say, well, yes, but we would have to do something slightly different. So you build a relationship with the customer and you start talking about ideas and their future needs. And then you can come up with a product idea that none of the competitors would come up with, because all they knew to ask was, what do you want me to make?
Yeah, because I just had one similar case like a few days ago. Should be perfect for this. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly, I think, the right way to go about it. is to have a discussion with your customer about it. And then you can show them a product you may have and say, well, what do you think about this product? And they might say, well, I like these things, but here's a few things that I don't like. You take that information back, you can make an even better product. So
Yeah.
see, if what most places there's competition. You've got competition in your business, and when I was in the semiconductor world, there were many competitors. And if all you do is create exactly what the customer asked for, he is telling exactly the same thing to all my competition. So maybe a year from now, you've got all these similar products coming out because he told all my competitors to make the same thing. That's terrible because now you're just competing on price. You've all got
Yeah.
very similar products, which is exactly what the customer wanted. He wanted
Mm-hmm.
lots of similar products and competing on price. That's not where you want to be. You want to come out with an innovative product that nobody else thought of. In some cases, even a product that the customer didn't know to ask for, but when he sees it, he goes, that's the perfect solution to my problem.
So, and like when one field will just starts to appear, that there will be a period for people that don't have to work that hard. Only if they do that, they will get benefits, they will get profits. There will be that kind of period. But when more and more people start to involve this field, then it starts to become like more like a competition, and then the market will be hard for them to explore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And like the international business, like back to maybe 1980s, it's pretty easy for like Chinese people to start to do the international business. Only if you foreigner knows about me, then the order is mine, because it's very rare because the network is not that so like nowadays. Yeah. So, but now after a few decades, it's become more and more, it's become much harder to do
Yes.
this. They have to be like outstanding among all the competitors. Yeah.
Right. I agree. In the semiconductor business that I was in for about 2 decades, early in my career in semiconductors, it was much easier to define new products that didn't exist. But today, it's much more difficult to do that. There's so many products. So as a business matures, I think it becomes more difficult to innovate. So I think one of the keys then is look for new markets. It's difficult to take a mature market like semiconductors or like automobiles or something like that and create an entirely new product. So you need to look for new opportunities, new markets, and ideally ones that are big, and things that are disruptive. COVID-19 again creates new opportunities that didn't exist 2 years ago. So being visionary and looking for those kinds of opportunities in a field that is not crowded today can be exciting.
Actually, in the past, I felt like having the ability to always be prepared to start from zero is very important, because we all are, and we lose something while we grow. But and in that case, I'm not afraid of trying like different things I'm passionate about. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, staying in one area perfectly to maximum could sometimes value more, because I quitted my job like a few years ago and then went to Spain. It kind of like a new zero for me. And then
Yeah.
when I came back from Spain, then I started from zero again to do what I did, like business, international business again. I felt like comparing to those people who have been dedicating this area for uh, more years than me, I felt like the sources I have is less than them.
I think it's really good for people to try different things. Whenever I was hiring people, I didn't hire for experience. I hired for character. Now, character is a large category. It involves intelligence, communications ability, how they work as a team. Lots of things are under the character umbrella. But character, in my view, is far more important than knowledge, because you can teach the knowledge that is missing. In a few years in a new area, you'll be just as knowledgeable as the other people in that area. But it's very difficult to teach character. 4 years working for a company called IDEO Product Development, probably one of the best known product development firms in the world, did lots of innovative work for a wide range of customers like Apple and so forth. And whenever they hired somebody, they try to hire what they called a T-shaped individual, like the letter T. And what that means is there might be one area where they have deep experience. They're an expert in one particular part of engineering or design, but they also have very broad experience over lots of different areas, not as deep. So it's a combination of having deep experience in at least one area, but also having some experience, maybe not very deep, but in a lot of different areas. And those kind of T-shaped personalities are the people that can collaborate the best, because you can take multiple T-shaped individuals that have different areas of expertise, but they can all communicate because they have that broad experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. Do you have any words to say, like if you go back to your late 20s or early 30s?
Yeah, I sometimes think, boy, I should have joined Apple or something like that. I should have accepted that job. I think about things like that sometimes, all these companies I've seen. You never know. Funny story is one guy that I hired who actually was, and you don't need to put this in your video if you don't want, but he was a guy that worked at Stanford and helped develop the first networking hardware at Stanford University. And the four guys that he was working with went off to start a company. And he said, no, I'm going to stay at Stanford. I like my job. Well, those guys were the guys that started Sun Microsystems. So it became hugely successful. Sun stood for Stanford University Networks. So Scott McNeely, Bill Joy, Vinod Khosla, Andy Bechtolsheim, and this guy George, he stayed at Stanford. So he missed out being a founder of Sun Microsystems, which became enormous. So I ran across him some years later when he was just a consultant, and I was starting my startup company. And he had a job offer from a brand new company that was starting up. It was a husband and wife working out of their kitchen in their home. And he was doing a hardware design for a networking board for them. And they offered him a job as their first employee. And I talked him out of it. I said, George, you read about, the successes in the newspaper, the Apples of the world and whatnot, but the 99% that fail, you don't hear about. You only hear about the 1% that succeed. So I talked him out of that because, of the risks that were involved. And that turned out to be Cisco that was founded by this husband and wife. And I talked him out of being employee number one at Cisco and joining my startup company. So you never know, this poor guy, George, he missed out on the founder of Sun, founding a group at Sun Microsystems. And then I talked him out of becoming the first employee at Cisco. So you never know.
Interesting. Do you think life is just directed by the fate? Do you believe fate?
Yeah, I do believe fate. I believe in God, and I believe that God orchestrates things. We don't get to see His plans, but I think that there is a plan to our lives. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be without troubles. I think we learn from troubles, and oftentimes the plan is that we have to go through a lot of troubles on the way to success.
Thank you, Dave, for taking the time out of your day to join me in this video. And thank you guys for watching. I still believe the stronger support and company we have for each other, the closer we'll get to our goal.